internalized body cells must adjust their genetics and behaviors to accommodate external outer world environments. How do our bodies respond to the environment in our outer world? I'm your host, Bruce Lipton, for the series on inner evolution. Amoebas and other single-celled organisms live independently in and directly respond to the conditions in their outer world environment. However, cells in an animal, such as a human, live within a separate internal environment. The human skin, the functional equivalent of the cell membrane, is the source of the nervous system that links the intercellular environment with the outer world. The nervous system reads the environmental signals, while the mind interprets these signals and sends regulatory information internally to control the genetics and behavior of our cells and organs. The mind has two interdependent elements: the conscious and the subconscious minds. The conscious mind is connected to your personal identity, your spirituality. This mind is a creative mind. The subconscious mind is a database of stored behavioral programs. This session will describe the functional differences between these two minds and how they learn in different ways. Let's start with how the fate of a cell is determined. As been described in previous episodes, my studies on stem cells and tissue culture revealed a very important fact, that the fate of these cells in the culture dish was actually dependent on the chemistry of the culture medium. Well, the significance of this is that culture medium is the equivalent of blood. Well, how does this relate to the cells in our own body? Well, first understand this very important fact. A human is not a single organism. A human body is a skin-covered culture dish with 50 trillion cells. And the original culture medium, blood, contains information. And it's the composition of this blood that actually will determine the fate of the cells. Well, there are two important components in blood that we must consider. Number one, blood provides nutrition. When I'm in the laboratory, I use the best ingredients possible to manifest culture medium for a very simple reason. If I compromise on the ingredients, the cells actually suffer. If I feed them culture medium with less than the best culture ingredients, the cells actually begin to get sick and they will die. Well, this is relevant to us as well, because since we are creating culture medium, blood, we want to make the best culture medium possible, which then means we should really just eat organic, natural foods, because industrial farm foods are filled with toxic elements that will negatively affect the cells. So a diet of wholesome food is important in creating the best culture medium for our cells. But in addition to nutrition, culture medium contains information. And this information includes hormones, growth factors, emotional chemicals. And so we should recognize that a human body is adjusting and responding to the environment at all times. So there are actually an external environment that has to be understood, as well as an internal environment within the body. Well, who reads these environments? The answer is the nervous system, the brain, represents perception of the environment. And as the brain reads the environment, it can release neurochemicals, hormones, emotional chemicals into the body that will control the fate to organize it to be in harmony with whatever the conditions of the environment are. So a very important result is that the brain is interpreting the environment, and that's what controls our cells. So simply, environmental signals are what are responsible for controlling the fate of our biology. Well, when we talk about animals in general, this holds true. But as we get into higher organisms in the evolutionary tree, guess what? There's a new additional device that is interpreting the environmental signals, and that is the mind. The mind is an interpretation of what the brain perceives. And significance of that is, well, each of us have different minds. Each of us can look at the world and respond different way to the same environment. So in looking at the sequence of flow of information, environmental signals are picked up by the brain as perception. The mind does an interpretation of these environmental signals and then releases chemistry such as hormones, growth factors, emotional chemicals that will coordinate our body to conform to the environment that we perceive. And so it's actually belief, which is the representation of the mind's perceptions, that control our biology. Our thoughts release neurochemicals, and these agents control our biology. To give you a simple example of how this works, I'd like to use a cartoon of the brain. And in this cartoon, what you see is the brain is holding a flask of culture medium, which is actually blood, and it's feeding the cells in our skin-covered dish with this blood culture medium. If the mind is perceiving love, then the interpretation of that environment representing love causes the brain to release chemistry that actually complements that perception. So the brain releases some very important chemistry into the blood to control our biology. Included in this chemistry is dopamine, a hormone that gives us pleasure. In addition, the brain releases a hormone called oxytocin. This hormone actually causes us to bind with the source of that love. So this allows parents and children to bond together because of that love. In addition, when you're in love, the brain also releases vasopressin. This is another hormone that actually causes us to be more attractive to our partner. In turn, this keeps the love lasting a lot longer. And lastly, when you're in love, the brain releases growth hormone. And growth hormone, as the name implies, enhances our vitality. So very simply, the cocktail of chemicals released by the brain when we're experiencing love is released into the blood, the culture medium that influences our cells. The result is this: when people fall in love, they're healthier, they glow. People could even say, look at these people, you can see how they're in love by just looking at their physiology. Love enhances our growth and our vitality. However, if you open up your eyes and you see something that scares you in the environment, well, that experience of fear causes a completely different set of chemicals to be released by the brain. And as a result, changes the behavior profoundly, because the blood is now containing information other than information about love. So for example, when you're in fear, you release stress hormones such as cortisol, norepinephrine. These hormones actually change the circulation of the body and put us not into a growth phase, but actually prepare us for fight or flight, and actually to save our lives in what fear we are perceiving. In addition, fear also causes chemicals that interfere with our immune system to be released into the blood, and then this shuts down the immune system and actually leads to illness when we are living in what is called chronic fear. The consequence of this is very important because it really represents this: the function of our mind is to create coherence between our beliefs and our reality. In other words, if you believe there's something to be afraid of, then the mind's job is to create a behavior that will actually make a correlation or a coherence between that belief of fear and the reality that we're experiencing. When you are experiencing love, well, then the function of the mind is to manifest the chemistry to control our behavior so that we can experience that love. Point is simple: whatever programs we possess about our perceptions of the planet, the function of the mind is to create behavior that makes our life coherent with our beliefs. This is actually not a new idea at all. It's 2,500 years old. The Buddha actually said, "What we think, we become." Well, this is actually what's going on as our thought processes adjust the chemistry of our biology, which in turn adjust our behavior, and then in result, whatever our thoughts are, we will become that in the world. I've been talking about this for many years, actually, since 1985, and conventional science has really resisted everything I've said about that. But then again, in 1990s, the new idea of epigenetics came in. And also, in the current time now, science is also beginning to recognize how our consciousness is creating the character of our lives. Now, to give you a quote from Steve Cole, researcher at the University of California, Los Angeles Medical School, this is what he said in a paper, and it's profoundly important. To an extent that immunologists and psychologists rarely appreciate, we are architects of our own experience. He goes on to say, your subjective experience carries more power than your objective situation. Well, that last sentence is a little bit complex because I can change it and make it much more profoundly simple in this regard. Let's rewrite it as the following. Your belief carries more power than your reality. And this is the profound, important understanding of how our belief is actually creating our life experiences. Well, it's all influenced by the mind. And we say the mind, a lot of people think, well, that's a single thing, the mind. But this is actually incorrect because the mind is comprised of two subunits, the conscious and subconscious minds. These are two different entities. Most importantly, the conscious and subconscious minds have different functions. And very importantly, the conscious and subconscious minds learn in different ways. The function of the conscious mind, well, that's the latest evolution of the brain. It's actually a lobe of neural tissue right behind your forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex. This is the seat of your personal identity, your source, or your spirituality. The character of the conscious mind is creativity. So I say, well then, what is the role of the conscious mind? It's to manifest our wishes, our desires, our aspirations. And the conscious mind is the seat of positive thinking, which profoundly changes our lives. A lot of people say, come on, that positive thinking can't be real. But guess what? The understanding of the placebo effect goes back nearly 100 years. What is the placebo effect? It's a positive belief about a medical drug or a medical therapy where someone thinks that the drug or therapy is going to heal them. They believe it's going to heal them. They take the magic pill, get better, and then find out that the pill was just a sugar pill. So all of a sudden you have to ask them what made them better. Well, obviously it wasn't the sugar pill. It was the belief in the sugar pill that is responsible for the placebo effect. By reprogramming the subconscious mind, we can manifest a heaven on earth experience. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Bruce Lipton, for this series on inner evolution through biological change. Join me for the next episode where we talk about heaven on earth and taking the proverbial red pill.
2020, the year of karma. 2020, the ultimate red pill.